Welcome to another edition of the Dog or Pass podcast. This for UFC Vegas 35. This episode is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. A little later on in the episode, Pat will drop in. You'll hear his dulcet tones of his voice, and he'll tell you about the NFL free money offer that they've got going, which sounds pretty legit. Cody Saftik on the line here. Coming into, we were talking about just before we went live, but why aren't we calling this like the Ultimate Fighter finale anymore? Now it's just like, it just melded into just the unending numbered Vegas cards that we have.
Yeah, they used to be like tough finales. It used to be an event. They used to get you pumped up. They used to market it a little bit. You'd see commercials and stuff being ran, but instead, no, it's just Vegas 35, another event at the Apex. Let's not talk about this whatsoever. And yet there will be two tournament champions, but something else that we spoke about off camera was this is lower level than what you see on Contender Series typically. Like a lot of these Contender Series guys are former LFA champs or CFFC champs or somebody from, the top Canadian guys or some decent guy from Brazil. But in this case, it's, not to say that guys like Bryan Battle haven't given an excellent account of themselves on the show. I just mean prior to getting on the show, the vast majority of these guys had almost no experience. It's almost comical. Both first-round picks of both teams, Ortega and Volkanovski, both lost in the first round, right? Ryder Newman, the second-round pick for Volkanovski, lost in the first round. This Petroski guy got through a round. We'll talk about him later. Lampros out in the first round. Like, you get Gilbert Urbina coming in replacing Turcios and Gore. They were both fourth-round picks. Ricky Turcios was a fifth-round pick. Brady Hiestand, again, another kid that gave a good account of himself on the show, was a seventh-round pick. Bryan Battle was an eighth-round pick. Someone's getting a six-figure contract, so whatever. It's greasy MMA, but we love talking about MMA regardless. And speaking of greasy, and to pay a little bit of respect to your boy, Vince Pichel, I went with the Cody from Hell Saf Shell mustache. So just a little bit of kudos to him because he really did pull through. And I know you're expecting your boy to get the win as always, but
that's what Vince does.
That guy's just like he's just like the engine that keeps on ticking, man. He's always got something left. You smack him with a couple good shots, he comes right back. He's always in it. Great ring IQ.
His ring IQ is next level. And like he's a jack of all trades in terms of his skills. It's like the only times that we've really seen him completely falter is when he's taking on guys who are just way better wrestlers than him. But it's like he's pretty good at wrestling. His striking's good. His pace is good. His cardio's good. I wouldn't say he's elite at anything, but he's elite at making me bucks because I'm now 9-0. Yeah. The Pichel whisperer lives on. Anyway, let's get into these fights. We got Edson Jr. Barboza taking on Giga Chikadze. Minus 115, Barboza. Minus 105, Chikadze. You got Cody.
Yeah, okay, so speaking of the engine that just keeps ticking, I mean, you've got Edson Barboza. In many ways, this guy just refuses to go away. He's taken some bad losses, and he's taken some bad beatings. But he always finds a way to come back just as athletic as before. He found a way to reinvent himself at 145 pounds. Like, who would have thought that at his age, after all those wars, after being a considerably big lightweight, how do you make 45? But again, just like Jose Aldo, he's kind of got this late career resurgence going where all of his skills are still intact. He's successfully dropped down a weight class, and he seems to be gone one last run. So, yes, he is 35 years old, but I've been impressed with his work. The Danny Ige fight could have gone either way. It was extremely close. Most pundits seem to believe that Barboza was robbed in that fight. Was a good fight. Shows you he's still got something left in the tank. It's the next two. The Makhmud and Meerschaert fight, sure, he was trying to wrestle the entire time. Barboza did a good job of showing us that traditionally good takedown defense, keeping the fight standing in the later part of the rounds, winning with the striking exchanges. But that last fight against Shane Burgos, I mean, man comes in as an underdog, slight underdog. Burgos is on a tear, right? It's that young breed against the old guard. And the old guard, Edson Barboza, just looked as young as ever. I mean, his striking's on point as it always is. He's one of these guys that's standing. He's got the leg kick. We always know he's got the leg kick, but he's got big, heavy hooks, nice, big, long punches. I mean, he uses his 5'11" frame pretty effectively. And in fact, Giga Chikadze is known for his long frame. He's about 6 feet tall at 145 pounds. Crazy. But it'll be Edson Barboza coming in with the 1-inch reach advantage. And he does a pretty good job of snapping out that jab using that. So we know he's got the low kicks. We know he's got some decent striking. If he could theoretically mix in a little bit of wrestling in this spot, would be great. Thing is, he hardly ever does. He shows one takedown in his last 6 fights. It was over Paul Felder, but again, wrestling's not something he's looking to go to all the time. And for that reason, even though I think I am going to take Edson Barboza, you can't feel confident about it. This could be Giga Chikadze's coming out party, or this could be that one opportunity everybody's been waiting to finally hit the big fade button on Giga Chikadze. Because again, when he came into the UFC, he just had a run of the softest level of guys on the regional scene. That was the narrative. Every capper broke down every time he fought, for sure. He fought low-level guys. He's a kickboxer. Wait till someone takes him down. But again, when you look at his run, it's been tailor-made to a guy's career. These are the kind of opposition that you can go out and look good against. He beats Brendan Davis on a split decision, super competitive, right? He beats Jamal Emerson on a split decision, and Emerson's low ring IQ is what cost him that fight. So not a great start out the hop. And he's looked good his last 4, but Erwin Rivera, currently in jail for murder, Omar Morales, seemingly missing something, and it wasn't a great fight. Jamie Simmons, should be a walk in the park, and he made it look as such. And then Cub Swanson, legendary name, kind of at the tail end of his career, right? So you can make that argument, well, Edson Barboza is a legendary name, tail end of his career, but I believe he's still got something left in the tank. And his run has not been tailor-made for anybody. He's fought all of the best guys the sport has to offer, and generally gives a pretty okay account of himself every time out. So, if we're going with experience, then it's got to be Barboza. If we're going with durability, we know Barboza can take a shit kicking and come back where we I don't know about Giga. Have we seen Giga get beat real bad in there and have to face adversity and come back? As far as 5-round championship cardio goes, it looks like Giga is able to pace himself extremely well, and therefore probably is going to be able to fight 5 rounds in a striking type battle. Maybe. But if this thing did get greasy, would we have confidence that Giga can go a hard 5? There's just too many question marks. And the flip side to that, if you are backing Giga, you're not in the wrong here. Again, this could be his coming out party, and he could go out there, look like $1 million and knock out Barboza, and then he jumps right into title contention, and we're going to start believing in him. I just need to see a little bit more. This would be his first bona fide win, in my opinion, like legit top echelon win. But until he notches that, I just can't get behind him quite yet. So I will go Barboza, but I am hesitant. I am lenient, a little bit worried, and probably won't have the highest amount of investment on this main event.
I already bet Edson Barboza. I got him at -110, -115 is fine. I see the market's finally starting to move because, frankly, everyone's got him Edson Barboza bet this week. So that is always a little bit terrifying. Everybody's on one side of a pick'em, and the line stays close to a pick'em. It's always you kind of start wondering, do the books know something that I don't know? But I think really what it comes down to here for me is just volume. You go through all of the numbers of Edson Barboza's career. He's throwing at a much higher clip than Giga Chikadze. Giga's got, the body kick, the kick to the body could be a big problem early. The one thing that really scared me away from Giga completely, though, is in that Jamal Emmers fight. We'll talk about Jamal Emmers a little bit later down the card. But, and obviously Emmers was mixing and wrestling. He got 2 takedowns in the fight. But
could have gotten a lot
round
more.
round three, Giga is looking hurting for certain. And so, yeah, like he clearly, like, if wrestling is mixed in, and maybe Edson pulls off a little bit of he starts going for some takedowns in this spot. Like, he's been working on these things. I mean, usually he's on the wrong side of the wrestling, but like I would imagine he's probably got the wrestling advantage. That's not where he's at his best. But Giga, round 3 against Jamal Emmers was definitely problematic. Like, he was really, really slow as he entered that round. Was getting outstruck by Jamal Emmers in round 3. And then, now he's got 2 quick knockouts, looking great. The Cub Swanson body kick. Everyone saw it. He's kind of catapulted, but if Edson gets out of the first 2 rounds in this fight, I like him even more. So I'm in on Edson Barboza. I'll be watching live and maybe adding more if we just get through the danger zone early on. That's really all we got to say about that one. We've got Bryan Battle taking on Gilbert Urbina. Bryan Battle is a -160 favorite. Urbina can be had for +140. This was supposed to be Bryan Battle against Trishan Gore. Trishan Gore actually looked pretty good. I watched a couple of his fights on the Contender Series, or on the Ultimate Fighter, and he looks like we'll see him obviously in in the months to come whenever he gets over injury. But Urbina had fought Trishan Gore, got pretty dominated. Gore just kind of controls range the entire time, able to pick him apart and put him to sleep. I guess Gilbert Urbina fancies himself a bit of a grappler, I guess. Like that's what he did against Micheal Gilmore, who we'll talk about a little bit later down the card. He went in there, basically just like swarmed him, grabbed him, got control, a little bit of ground and pound, found a sub. I mean, you'll hear what we have to say about Gilmore later on. It isn't great. Bryan Battle, I think he looks like he's got all of the tools. He's had a good account of himself on the show. I like his work in the clinch. Like he's throwing some really nice elbows in the clinch, and his takedown defense looks pretty solid. He's pretty long for the weight class. Urbina, I think, has fought at 170 pounds before. I think it's Bryan Battle or bust in this spot. What about you?
Yeah, I think you got to go with Bryan Battle as well. He's looked better on the show, and he does tend to be the bigger guy, as you mentioned. I mean, you got Urbina, who's largely fought between 170, and he has fought at catchweights of 175 and even as high as 179. But this is at middleweight. Bryan Battle is the actual middleweight. Once upon a time, this is going back a long time ago now. It must be 2015, right? When we were doing the Bookie Beatdown at the time before we had to switch the name due to legal reasons. Anyways, regardless, we talked about one Hector Urbina. Paul says, first time he coined the phrase, this guy is the worst guy in the UFC. Turns out Paul was right.
I don't use that phrase. As he is right. And then I don't use that phrase anymore because, look at the state. There's so many bad guys. It's hard keeping track at this point.
The only way you'd be able to use it is like if a CM Punk was to come back, or it was like somebody, it was a novelty, they shouldn't be on the roster, but like Dana was giving some celebrity a fight in the UFC for whatever reason. It's like you could most definitely pinpoint that one guy as the worst guy in the UFC. At the time, the UFC making the roster still meant something. So the fact that Hector Urbina was on it, he was super low level. Paul was all over it. Sure enough, I think he fought Sheldon Westcott, and he got smoked right out of there. Easy money for Sheldon Westcott. He made a terrible impression of himself. Regardless, Hector Urbina just didn't pan out. So you got Gilbert is the younger brother. So right there, it wasn't like this is, oh man, he's coming from a high-end MMA family. I think there's 3 fighters in the Urbina family, but none of which have barely jumped at any stardom. One thing I noticed about Gilbert is that he turns pro in 2014, right? 1 month after his 18th birthday. A month after he turns 18 years old, he turns pro, wins 2 fights in 2014, fights twice in 2015, takes 2016 off, fought once in 2017, fought once in 2018, fought once in 2019, took 2020 off, and then jumps into the Ultimate Fighter. How's he fare on the Ultimate Fighter? Wins his first fight and then loses to Chirico Gore. Now, mind you, like you said, he beats Michael Gillmore, who we'll talk about in a bit, and then gets knocked out by Chirico Gore. No world is he making the finals. In fact, he'd be lucky to make the finale card in general. But just by chance, Chirico Gore's out with a knee injury, and so this gives Urbina an opportunity to step in. So right off the bat, he's the smaller man. He shouldn't be in the finals to begin with, and his game looks limited. He's an okay striker. I'm not going to take that away from him. Where he shines best is he's a decent enough wrestler, and that's one thing with Hector Urbina, and I believe the other brother's name is Eli. They're all wrestlers, right? It is a wrestling family, turned fight family. The fight side of things not great. The wrestling side of things, at least that is a decent enough base that you could potentially utilize, right? Bryan Battle doesn't have a base. He's not a wrestler. He's not a striker. He quite literally walked into an MMA gym and just picked up MMA. He started fighting amateur just 4 years ago. He turned pro 2 years ago, 2019. Doesn't have hardly any experience, but what I'll give him is whereas one guy has fought very sporadically once a year really, over the last 5 years and really had not gotten a whole lot of experiences, Bryan Battle will just start fighting. And fighting is how he got his experience. He hasn't wrestled. He hasn't done his striking. It's just fighting. And dude, pretty decent amateur career. Loses his debut, ends up rattling off 8 straight. Amongst those, he beats Impa Kasanganay by unanimous decision and picks up a win over Cody Brunridge from the Contender Series. Brunridge was a solid collegiate wrestler out of Michigan, and Impa Kasanganay is a super solid prospect currently fighting in the UFC, right? The Kasanganay fight in particular, Bryan Battle just grinds him, takes him down, out wrestles him. It's solid enough work. Turns pro, and I mean, yeah, he's been fighting extremely low-level guys, but you can see that there is something there. There is something in progress. Watching this season of Tough Man, like not impressed. Like the the level didn't seem super elite. And the fact that all these 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th round picks are the guys that made it this far, I think is a pretty good indicator of that. But Bryan Battle actually looked like at 26, give this guy even more experience, move him along, don't throw him to the Wolves right away, could be decent enough. And so this is his finale to win. I agree with the line. I agree with the odds. And I agree with, it seems like most people are on him, but I'm going to agree with it. Last thing I want to mention with Gilbert Urbina, because how is Bryan Battle going to win? I would think by decision, but shit, Urbina was getting dropped. You watched the fight, the fight with Gore. He's getting dropped by jabs, man, and getting dropped a lot. His ability to withstand damage didn't look great. It was not a very good performance
Gore
whatsoever.
looks good though.
In fact,
Gore would have been the favorite.
That's fair.
Gore would have been the favorite if he was able to show up on this day.
Are you sure about that? I'm not entirely sure about that.
I think he would have been the favorite. I think he actually looks pretty decent. I think him and Battle would. Yeah,
I thought Battle looked okay.
I think they both.
And you also
okay.
mentioned the uppercuts from the clinch. He fights decent at range. He fights good in the clinch. He can wrestle. Because he doesn't have one set base, he's a complete generalist and just picked all the skills up at once. He's pretty good at mixing it all in together. But
for sure,
maybe you're right. Him and Gore would have been an excellent fight and a fun finale. Him versus Urbina, I don't get that same impression. This one should be Bryan Battle. So this is low level, right? Your buyer beware is right there. So it's not super high level. Both guys have holes in their game. It just seems like Urbina's probably got more of them, and Battle's got the higher upside. So we'll go with Bryan Battle.
Ricky Turcios takes on Brady Hiestand, -160 Turcios, +140 Hiestand. Who you got?
Okay, so this one's probably, if these guys fighting a few years down the road, I think Brady Hiestand beats him, right? Does he beat him currently right now at this stage in his career? And that's an excellent question, man. He's only 22 years old. For my money, it's a little, it's too young, right? How much more development are we going to see out of him, right? We hate getting caught in these situations where you get a Chase Hooper or a TJ Laramie, someone that probably does have a legitimate amount of skill, but they're getting thrown in with the big boys. And the one thing with Ricky Turcios is him and Josh Rettinghouse were kind of the big dogs on this season. They had actual fight experience. They had fought in legitimate levels of competition. Rettinghouse, he's fought and he's got some decent wins over in Russia. He beat Sergey Morozov over in Russia. That's a decent enough guy.
He's been Turcios the PFL himself, and he's been around Rettinghouse.
Yeah, so those guys had some experience, but this Brady Hiestand, he's 22 years old. He's still very green, and that's why he goes off as the 7th round pick. When you look at his wins, 0-2, 0-0, 0-4, 0-6, 9-5 Chan Anhelager from Alberta, pretty solid, and 1-12. So let's take Chad off of that. It's a 1-25 or something like that record from his pros. So he's fought on a super low level. But again, he jumps on the Ultimate Fighter, and where he's low level before he gets there, he looks pretty decent on the show, man. This kid can wrestle, and he goes out there and beats Rettinghouse in the first round on a split decision. Hard-fought split decision. You see he can wrestle. You see he can scramble. See this kid's definitely a willing body. And then he goes out and he knocks out Vince Murdoch. So Vince Murdoch, in my opinion, is not very good. Also, Vince Murdoch had a knee injury coming into that fight, so you could make an excuse that he wasn't even at his best to begin with. But Brady went out there. He got the first-round knockout. Now he's in the finals. Apparently, he had some injuries coming off the show, but he's been given some time. He's been able to heal. And no doubt that was a positive experience for a 22-year-old kid, because he has to test his mettle against the most experienced guy in the show in the first round. And then furthermore, went out and beat Vince Murdoch, a guy that fought on the Contender Series, a guy that apparently was actually signed to fight in the UFC, but he had that brain hemorrhage, or he had a bad brain scan, so they nixed it. Then he fought in Contender Series. All I'm saying was he was supposed to be a UFC veteran. Those are 2 solid wins. In fact, of anybody on the show, Brady Hiestand probably picked up the 2 biggest victories. I mean, he knocked out Murdoch in the first. I like what I see out of him in terms of he's probably got the wrestling edge here over Turcios. The problem is that Ricky just keeps throwing and throwing and throwing and has good jiu-jitsu and will throw up submissions and will scramble and will get back up. But his takedown defense is actually a little bit of a worry. And the worry for me would be that Brady's able to take him down and neutralize him, hold him down, and then use that as a path to victory. But again, with Ricky, he's at a Team Alpha Male. He trains wrestlers on the daily. He's the way more experienced guy. He shows 2 pro losses, Mano Martinez, who we're going to talk about later on the undercard, and Boston Salmon, who also fought in the UFC. So that in itself, he's fought in the higher level opposition. He's got a win over Josh Pava. That's pretty solid. He's the more experienced guy. He seems like he'll be able to do more at distance He'll be able to do more in the open space. And I think if it's a fight of who's going to outwork the other guy, I think Ricky might be able to just persuade the judges with his style. But this Brady kid can't be overlooked. He's most definitely a live underdog. And I think in a few years, he's a prospect. He's a 22-year-old prospect. Ricky's 27. He's still a prospect, no doubt about it. But it's like he lost to Boston Sam. And Manny Martinez, I think, is pretty decent. Lost to Boston Salmon doesn't really do nothing for me. And then since then, again, he's another one of these guys that's fought sporadically. So you're getting two more lower level guys, still a little bit green, holes in their game. But I'm a little bit worried about this Brady kid. He could definitely come in and cash. And what's he's currently sitting at? Plus 140, right? So not even a terrible line on him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, from watching tape, I kind of thought it was dog or pass. I thought what I was really impressed with Brady is that his takedowns looked pretty solid. Like his entries to the takedowns, really, really quick, like technical. He looks like he's got a lot of potential. But yeah, 22 years old, obviously fighting somebody, a higher level of competition than he's ever fought in his career. I'm on the over here. I parlayed it with something we'll talk about a little bit later down the card. I know that, Hiestand has a whole bunch of like finishes on his record, but watching what he's capable of doing on the Contender Series, I don't think his hands definitely seem to have a long ways to go, and I think the veteran in Turcios is going to neutralize that a little bit. I think it's a close fight. If I was forced to pick a side, it would be Hiestand at plus 140, but I like the over 2.5 minus 175 as a parlay piece. That is where my money's at. Moving on down the card, we got Kevin Lee taking on Daniel Rodriguez at 170 pounds. Kevin Lee, minus 150 favorite. Rodriguez can be had for plus 130. I don't like this for Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee was massive. He's got lots of skills. He's still only 28, 29 years old. A lot of the ability is already there. And we've seen, on his best days, the guy looks like an absolute world beater. But him as a favorite taking on Rodriguez, who's 4 inches taller than him, Lee's got really freakishly long arms. So I guess the reach advantage is actually still with Lee. But, the size, I always hate when I think the best path to victory for Kevin Lee in this fight is to utilize that wrestling. But we know about Daniel Rodriguez. He's a 10th planet jiu-jitsu guy, so he's pretty solid down there. And his stand-up game is awesome. So it's like a smaller guy moving up a weight class, and he wants to control in wrestling as a minus 150 favorite. It isn't for me. I wanted to talk to you first, but I'm considering betting Daniel Rodriguez in this spot.
Honestly, it's never a bad idea to fade Kevin Lee as if you can get a plus money ticket against him, just because, what version of him is going to show up? Paul, I think we both know if this kid shows up, he's amongst the best in the world. He shows up for even in spots in certain fights, the Tony Ferguson fight, the first round. It's like, my God, he's got Tony Ferguson mount. He's pounding on him. A much better version of Tony Ferguson. The Gregor Gillespie fight with the head kick, oh my God. The Edson Barboza fight, outside of him getting caught with that spinning wheel kick for very briefly that kind of caused him to do the stanky leg, just dominates this guy and beats him within an inch to his life. That was a hard to watch beating, right? Kevin Lee shows up. He's a top talent. But the other side of it is when he doesn't, he gasses out really quick. I'm not going to say takes the easy way out, but his body's shutting down on him. And I think that's because of the weight cuts. This guy is a massive 155 pounder, and it's not translating into results. At 170 pounds, again, we have seen him fight at 170 before. He lost that fight with Rafael Dos Anjos. Again, another fight that he started off really good in and then completely exhausted himself by later on and got submitted in the 4th round. Key for him here is that it's not a 5-round fight. It's only a 3-round fight. So him at 170, he should be able to go out there and dominate with his wrestling or even just with some striking for at least 2 of these 3 rounds and then hold on beyond that. Even that last fight with Charles Oliveira, mind you, he's fighting the current lightweight champion. He gives a pretty good account of himself early on in that fight. He's fighting the best guy in the world and he's in it, but he missed weight by 3 pounds in that spot, or I guess 2 pounds. He comes in at 158. It was another bad weight cut. It's hard on his body. He is young, as you mentioned, but being young, every day you're filling out that frame more. Naturally, you're becoming larger, and the weight cuts are getting tougher and tougher. You're wreaking havoc on the body. Now look at a guy like Micheal Chiesa. He was a huge lightweight as well, but when he went to 170, it worked for him. All of a sudden, you can wrestle longer. All of a sudden, you're feeling better. All of a sudden, you can take a better punch. And Micheal Chiesa can always take a pretty good punch. He's got a solid chin. But you're just feeling a lot better. And I think if Kevin Lee comes out and is feeling better, he's going to have one of those good Kevin Lee performances. And if he does, it's going to be a problem. He was initially going to take out Sean Brady, who, as you know, I'm a massive fan of. So it was going to be a tough fight. But now Sean Brady's out. You got D-Rod coming in on short notice. Should be able to have Kevin Lee go out there, use his striking. He's trained by Dewey Cooper. He's got a decent jab. He's a long guy, as you mentioned, really long reach. The kicks are definitely coming. He's got solid power in his hands. And again, at the best of his abilities, he can knock guys out like Gregor Gillespie. At the worst of his abilities, he's still a decent enough striker to keep it live with D-Rod. It's grinding on him, taking him down, hopefully. Rodriguez has been training at the BMF ranch, right? So who's he really been working with? Like, who's really been testing his mettle? Who's really been grinding him into the ground day in and day out? Yeah, Gilbert Urbina. Is Cowboy still in the gym? Is Paul Felder dropping his commentary gig to fly back and say what's up to the gang? Like, it's mostly a bunch of buddies who would get together and train hard, don't get me wrong, but I just don't know that you have a Kevin Lee in the gym every day testing you, whereas Kevin Lee in Vegas, as he normally is, but, he surrounds himself with top-level guys. He knows his back's up against the wall in the sense that he's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. And even though it's all elite level competition, this is a step down and you need to shine against that step down. So as much as I completely understand that a shot on D-Rod is not crazy, it's decent dog money for sure. I don't know that I'm going to go that way. Minus 150 Kevin Lee seems pretty solid to me. Like, that's a good line. And in terms of, you can make a solid dog case, and I don't really think Gilbert or Urbina, but there's a lot of cases you can make for dogs in the spot. It's just figuring out which one we're actually going to pull the trigger on. If you want to go with D-Rod, I wouldn't fault you for it, but I myself am kind of feeling that Kevin Lee comes out, looks better at 170, neutralizes a lot of these positions, uses his wrestling. And even though, 10th degree jiu-jitsu, a lot of 10th degree jiu-jitsu is mostly off your back in neutralizing positions. You're looking for mission control. You're looking for triangle chokes. You're looking to attack arm bars. Like, I don't like guys that fish for submissions off their back. I like guys that try to scramble and get back up. When Kevin Lee's getting submitted, it's very rarely he's getting caught in shit while he's on top. Like, you got to tire this guy out. You got to make this guy work. You got to hopefully get on top of him or snack something up. And I just haven't seen enough from Rodriguez. So I'll go with the favorite here, minus 150, Kevin, the Motown Phenom Lee.
I'll watch the weigh-ins before I make any move, but I mean, I'm worried about the size disparity between these two. That's all. That's all I'll say about that.
The NFL is back, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is giving all new players a can't-miss offer for Week 1. Just bet $1 on any NFL game during Week 1 of the season and receive $200 in free bets instantly, no matter what. Take advantage of this limited time offer now. You heard it right. DraftKings is giving all new players $200 in free bets instantly when you place a bet of $1 or more on any Week 1 game. Head to DraftKings Sportsbook app now to check out all of the other great promotions and daily odds boosts. Plus, you can make every game a big game with a same-game parlay. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code DOP to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any Week 1 game. That's promo code DOP to get your free $200 in free bets instantly. For a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, and Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT.
All right, moving on down the card, we've got Andre Petroski taking on Micheal Gilmore. Minus 525 Petroski, plus 385 Gilmore. Petroski was like one of the favorites, I guess, on Tough this season to win. He's got the look. He's got, big old beard, super jacked. I mean, he was real greasy in that fight against Bryan Battle, where it's like he took a knee to the face, pretended it was a headbutt, got himself like 3 or 4 minutes to like recover essentially. Battle was able to finish him in the second round, but he kind of gave him a little smirk, like, yeah, I knew what I just did. Gilmore on the other side, it's like he showed against Gilbert Urbina that's like takedown defense doesn't really seem to be there, and that's what Petroski's gonna do. But the problem here is that we're getting into banana peel pricing. We've got 525 for Petroski. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm not gonna get too excited. But I think Petroski, I mean, this is kind of a cupcake matchup for a guy that they thought could be very marketable coming off of this season to get a win in front of the crowd or in front of the fans. And we'll see where he goes from here. But I think Petroski rolls here. I don't know how excited I am to parlay a guy with some significant gaps in his game, I still think, at minus 525. But yeah, Petroski should roll quite easily.
He should roll quite easily. He's the biggest favorite on the card. Everyone seems to be picking him this week. And, I'm also going to include myself on that list. But yeah, minus 525. It's like you're getting yourself into some greasy territory. Just because he looks the part doesn't mean he fights the part. And I'll admit, the guy looks good. He's got a good wrestling background. He was a 3-time state placer. Never won a state title. However, he wrestled out of Pennsylvania, which is one hell of a state to try to win a state title in, right? As far as college, I think he wrestled at North Carolina 1 year. That's a D1 university. Ends up transferring out to a D2 program. Wrestles there a little bit. So we know he can wrestle. We know he's game. He's already 30 years old. My problem is prior to jumping into the Ultimate Fighter, he went 5-0 against a low level of competition before running into Aaron Jeffrey. Now, Aaron Jeffrey's from nearby Burlington, Ontario, trains in Niagara Falls sometimes, the Niagara region, I guess I should say. But Aaron Jeffrey's a solid Canadian talent. Went over there, fought in enemy territory in the LFA promotion, headliner against Petroski. And Petroski looks good early, but he fades, man. He starts to fade hard. He's one of these guys that's a power wrestler. And once he doesn't really have his way with the wrestling, he just overexerts himself. Once he gets tired in that fight, that's when Aaron Jeffrey takes over and ends up knocking him out in the second round. So now he makes it onto the Ultimate Fighter. He's not even the first selection. He's a second-round pick. And when you see him fight in the match with Bryan battle, it's much of the same. He shoots in on the takedown. He gets a hold of the leg, and then he muscles a lot of it. He struggles to take Bryan battle down. And then as soon as Bryan battle locks up that roll, I guess he just ends up on top, throws him in an arm triangle choke. The guy taps out. So part of me thought he was tiring there. Part of me thought he tired in that Jeffrey fight. He's 30 years old. Can you revert him back? Can you change this all of a sudden? Like, he should be able to go out there and just run right through Micheal Gilmore. But if he wasn't to get an early finish, would he tire in the second round? Would he tire in the third round? Would he quit at some point? I guess that's a little bit something to think about. Gilmore, meanwhile, wasn't even on the show. He comes in as a late world placement because homie hurts his knee. So he jumps in and it's just like, okay, you're being brought in to lose. He does lose. Out of all the guys in the season you could have selected to bring in to give a fight, like why him? 34 years old, out of the Michigan regional scene. But again, there's a couple decent things that you could like. He's an 8-2 amateur. As an amateur, he shows a win over Chaos Williams, who's now fighting in the UFC, right? So it wasn't like it was a bad amateur run by no stretch of the imagination. As far as his pro fights go, like, yeah, again, fairly low level, but he's a karate guy. I think he won like a couple karate tournaments as recently back as a couple years, like 2019. He does move pretty decent. Like, he's got some okay movement, some okay footwork. He strikes while moving forward. And for a karate guy, like, he can throw singular strikes when he's moving back, but chances are he's going to get pressured here, get taken down, and get absolutely torched in there, probably within the first round. So I'm going to go with Petroski, but whereas he's such a big favorite and everybody's on him, I don't think that necessarily makes him a top ticket play because, it's low level, and in low level MMA, anything can happen. Turns out one guy can't take a punch, doesn't have any heart, doesn't have any cardio, right? Would you be surprised? No, because it's like he hasn't shown you any of those things. Petroski hasn't shown you a cast iron chin and durability, a willingness to win, deep cardio. He hasn't shown you any of those things.
No.
But he's a 525 favorite. You would expect those things out of a 525 favorite, and that makes it a little bit dicey. But listen, I'm not going to go against the grain. I won't be the contrarian here. I'm not going to pick against him. It's just I don't feel as confident as the line would suggest, simply because just because the UFC wants him to be the star of the show doesn't really mean he's got the skill set to do such.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. All right, moving on down the card, we got Makhmud Muradov taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Minus 525 Muradov, plus 385 Makhmud Muradov. The over-under in this fight, over 1.5 rounds, minus 125, under minus 105. I mean, Makhmud Muradov, he's kind of got the full package. Maybe not so much the wrestling. We haven't really had defensive wrestling. Seems very, very solid. Boxing is really like, is awesome. He was signed by like Floyd Mayweather and his team. They see something in this guy. Now we're starting to pay the price. We're paying the piper on this, but I mean, if it was Petroski or Muradov, I guess I would probably just go with Makhmud because I think he's just going to have a massive speed advantage here. The footwork is on point. The more important or the more interesting bet for me here, though, is the over 1.5 rounds, minus 125. He hasn't exactly been like some sort of like complete potent finisher in most of his career. I mean, he even took on Andrew Sanchez, who was like notably chinny and wasn't able to finish him until round 3. I know that Gerald's coming off of, two early finishes, Chimaev being one of them, and a lot of his fights, if he's able to get you to the mat, he has some of the best submission skills in the middleweight division. But I think we see at least 7.5 minutes out of these two. So my preferred bet on this fight is over 1.5 rounds, minus 125. Muradov, I guess, makes a decent parlay piece, but you're starting to pay the piper as well. Over 1.5. I don't think Muradov has showed us that he's in any rush to get finishes early in the UFC.
You're completely right with that, and that he does take his time. He has more of a boxing approach, and he generally sets these things up as third round finishes. You've seen him score them against Trevor Smith and Sanchez, that he'll take his time, find that KO blast later on in the fight. But with Meerschaert, I don't trust that any one punch won't be the punch. Like Ian Heinisch hasn't not shown big power punching abilities, and yes, he more or less folded him with the first right hand he threw. And Khamzat Chimaev had not really shown any striking so far to that point in his career. He needed only 17 seconds. So yeah, I think Meerschaert is chinny. I think that if you do hit him right on the button, you are going to knock him out. Regardless of if Muradov's doing it in the third round, he does have good technical boxing, and he has knocked out some pretty decent guys. So yeah, it could just be that one shot. With Meerschaert as well, he's going to try to get this fight to the ground. He's going to grind. He typically goes like an all or nothing style. Like he will grind you down. Either you get tired or he gets tired, someone getting tired. If he's not able to drag Muradov down, he's going to have to strike with him. That could be the problem. I think a lot of people have been impressed with what they've seen from Makhmud since he came to the UFC. Apparently he used to be gay for pay back in Czech Republic. So, I mean, the guy's used to performing under the bright spotlights. And as far as him being in the UFC, yeah, he's done fairly good for himself. He's got a good finishing ability. I just think that he's probably going to find the chin at some point and knock out Jared Meerschaert. Meerschaert's one of these guys, though, right? Where you'd love to bet this guy when he is these advanced price tags. In this case, you're getting a plus 385 price tag on him. Mm-hmm. And Meerschaert's got over 50 professional fights. He's got a nasty submission game. He's got a wealth of experience. And he's one of these guys that, is capable of springing the big win. Similar to a Paul Craig, he is chinny, no doubt about it. But given the right guy, he can pull off some submission magic. And for that reason, he's always going to be live. But I'm going to agree with your assessment when you look at the two big minus 525 favorites on the card. At least with Muradov, he's proven he's fought at elite level, and he can knock you out in the first. I believe he can knock you out in the first. But it's positive. I'm encouraged by the fact that he's able to knock guys out in the third round as well. Meaning that if Meerschaert is able to take him down in the first, maybe even have a good second round about him, we're not completely out of the water. He will fight for that KO all 3 rounds in. And it seems like his cardio and his power are able to translate into later rounds as well, which is always positive. So I got to go with Muradov. I'm going to have to go with Muradov inside the distance. As far as the over under 1.5, yeah, that's a great question. But I think the under 2.5 or the fight doesn't go the distance seem like the more likely scenario.
Yeah, I mean, Makhmud by knockout is already minus 175. Him inside the distance is... I don't have it in front of me on DraftKings. Oh, yeah, KO, TKO, submission is minus 200. So it's like... They're all over. The books
There
are
you
pretty
go.
wise
Right.
to how this shit plays out. If you were a Meerschaert believer, I think there is like 10 to 1s on Meerschaert by sub. I'm not one myself, but if you were, I think that would be like a decent little way to get some exposure here. I don't see him winning a fight on the feet. I would be pretty stunned to see him just like control from guard for 3 rounds. It's like he's either going to get a submission over Makhmud Muradov or he's not. So if you were going to make that play, I would, rather than even taking the plus 385, I would just take Meerschaert by sub at like 10 to 1. And some places even better out there. But people are on it. I think it's been creeping down. All right, next up we got Alessio Di Chirico taking on Abdul Razak Alhassan. Minus 240. Di Chirico, Abdul Razak Alhassan could be had for plus 195. Obviously, Abdul Razak Alhassan was supposed to take Antonio Bragonito last week. He was supposed to take him on, or he's supposed to take him on for like the last 2 weeks. And then Bragonito like pulled out of the first one and then pulled out of this one. And they gave him a much harder matchup. Like this is a tough spot for Abdul Razak Alhassan because Alessio Di Chirico has very, very good durability. And that's literally what we've seen from Abdul Razak. It's his only path to victory. It's like he's got to lay those hands on you. He's got to lay them on you early and put you away. Otherwise, you know, Di Chirico is just gonna. Di Chirico, when we get into round 2, round 3, it's just like his motor is gonna keep moving, and we've seen it enough times now that Alhassan just doesn't have 3-round cardio. And if he does have, like, when he does have like decent cardio in round 3, it's because he's had no volume and he hasn't been winning anything early on in the fight trying to conserve himself. So the guy's pretty knockout or bust, and he's taking on a guy who doesn't get knocked out. I understand why Di Chirico's minus 240 here. Seems pretty simple to me. What about you?
Dude, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I completely agree. I think that's Alessio Di Chirico's best quality so far has been his solid chin. He's got good durability, and not getting knocked out keeps him in the fight. And when he stays in the fight against these guys that have flimsy durability, he eventually finds a way to win. When you look at his run, he's taken on some decent power punchers. Like that Oluwale Bangbase never really panned out in the UFC, but that guy was shredded up and a dangerous power puncher, right? He's fought in the likes of him. Julian Marquez, you know, fairly one-dimensional, but a big husky power puncher. Makhmud Muradov, who we just spoke about, an excellent boxer. And when you look at the Makhmud fight, actually, Alessio Di Chirico wins on all 3 scorecards the 3rd round, fights his way back into the fight, sticks around the entire time, and his best round's the 3rd. And at least on, I think, MMA Junkie, Wrestling Observer, and MMA Brazil all scored the fight for Di Chirico 29-28. So, like, it was competitive enough, but he shows you that durability keeps him in the fight. Same thing can be said against Zach Cummins, and same thing can be said against Joaquin Buckley. Joaquin Buckley is kind of like power punching personified right now. This guy is going to come at you. He's going to land some heaters. If he knocks you out, you're out. If he doesn't knock you out, you'll be able to fight your way back into it. And what you see from Di Chirico is the same thing. You know, he uses his range extremely well against a shorter Buckley. He sets up that head kick extremely well. He gets the knockout victory. He effectively cashes as the biggest underdog on the card, and it was a plus 230 hit. All great stuff out of him. With our Razak Alhassan, again, you've already mentioned this. He's just a big-time power puncher, but he's a one-dimensional power puncher, and he prefers to get it done early. So how's this going to play out? Well, Alhassan probably going to go in there, try to get the early KO. If he does, he wins. If he doesn't, Di Chirico is going to work his way back into it. Whereas this is different than normal times, is that this guy Alhassan now is moving up to 185 pounds, right? He's campaigned largely as a welterweight throughout his career, dropping fights to Munir Lazez at a catchweight when he missed weight at 174. Against Chaos Williams, he missed weight again, came in at 172.5. And then his last time against Malkoun that was his middleweight debut. But he looked out of sorts big time. Did not look good. Did not look like a middleweight. His judo, right? Ineffective. Yeah. And yeah, he was a minus 310 favorite over Malkoun and he lost. He was a 210 favorite over Chaos Williams when he lost. He was a 350 favorite over Munir Laziz when he lost. Now, I can tell you something right here. The UFC was trying to get this man a win. They gave him Antonio Braganito, and that would have been an extremely favorable matchup for him, for sure. And they tried to book it twice. And when it fell through, they were like, would you take Chirico? And now it's just polar opposite. So you were taking Chirico right off the hop, but also probably a solid opportunity to think about a live bet, right? Whereas Alhassan will probably look good in the first round, and he could land some shots, but Chirico will probably come out, win the second round, even if it's closer, and then by the third round, it's going to be all Chirico. So good live betting opportunity, but as far as the pre-fight bet goes, it's going to be the same. It'll be Alessio Chirico.
I like that. I think that's pretty smart. Just because if Alhassan has any sort of success, it's going to be really early. You'll probably improve that minus 240 with a little bit of patience. Moving on down the card, we've got Wellington Turman taking on Smiling Sam Alvey. Turman can be had for minus 130, Alvey plus 110. I mean, Turman seems to fancy himself a bit of a grappler. In terms of his striking game, it's a lot of, forward pressure. And the durability seems questionable. The year is 2021, and I'm considering a bet on Sam Alvey here, Cody. What does Sam do? He likes backing up against the cage and then unleashing his straight left. Like, Turman looks like the exact type of guy. He'll try to go for takedowns. Sam's very, very hard to take down. This is a very winnable fight for Sam Alvey, and I'm kind of surprised I feel this way about it.
How scary is that? It's 2021, and I can't even get good internet connection, and Sam Alvey is being considered as a play. So I hear you. It's pretty crazy times all over the place, my man. But yeah, no, I agree. Sam Alvey's been on a terrible run, which is why you're going to be able to get him as a plus 110 underdog. Not huge underdog money, but all the same, he's going to be an underdog. But it just comes down to styles make fights. Styles make fights. Sam Alvey is extremely limited. At 205, he had virtually no success. He's currently on a run that is he's 0-5-1. 0-5-1 in his last 6 fights. He's 0-5-1 in his last 6 fights, right? Now, should he have won the Da-Ung Jung fight? Probably. And I think that's why they've kept him on the roster. But this hasn't been a good run whatsoever. He struggles to make 85 every time out, so you're going to have to wait until you see the weigh-ins. However, it was encouraging that he made 85 against Julian Marquez in his last fight. Ultimately did lose, but is still able to make the weight. He's got traditionally really good takedown defense, and his striking, he's got big-time power, but he's so lackadaisical. He doesn't throw enough actual strikes. And if you're not throwing, then you're not landing. If you're not landing, you're not going to knock this guy out. So that approach has lost him countless fights in the UFC. There's a reason he comes into this particular spot with 15 losses. But impressively enough, check out your favorite MMA fighter. How many guys got 20 KO wins in MMA? Not many. Sam Alvey does. He does have natural power and good takedown defense. So against the right opponent, if he could make those two things work again, it'll work. Also, it still does have a pretty good chin on him. Yeah. With Turman, dude, he comes from like a shoot to box base, but he's not looking to strike at all. He's looking to clinch up and get you to the ground. He wants to grind on the ground. That's a lie. He's looking to get you on the ground, but he's not looking to grind on the ground. He's looking to overzealously advance position, ends up losing the position in the process, and then tires himself out. Very discouraging work out of him. First and foremost, he only shows a 22% takedown accuracy through 5 fights in the UFC. Through 4 fights in the UFC, 22%. So again, his wrestling's not very good to begin with. And against Sam Alvey's traditionally strong takedown defense up against the cage, it's not likely that Turman's getting this thing down at will. If he was to get the fight down to the ground, this is where he blows it. He ends up on top of Andrew Sanchez. He ends up on top of Carl Roberson. Sorry, and not Andrew Sanchez. He just got blasted hard in that one. He ends up on top of Carl Roberson with the 4 takedowns, and he ends up on top of Bruno Silva. In both of those spots, he's not just holding the guy down and winning the round. He ends up trying to take the back. He ends up trying to advance, and he every single time will lose the position on that basis. When he loses the position, his opponents take over. And you saw that in that Bruno Silva fight. He did get the fight to the ground, Paul. It gets back up. He gets it to the ground. But he starts going for these stupid positions. He allows a much bigger, stronger, scarier man to get on top. And when Bruno Silva gets on top, he absolutely just uncorks this kid and knocks him out. Getting knocked out by Andrew Sanchez, not a good look, especially in the first round, especially in an all-striking affair. So he's been knocked out in 2 straight fights. His takedown offense, not all that good. He's still very young and green. He doesn't have great cardio. And he's going against a guy, Sam Alvey, that has strong takedown defense, strong power in his hands, and is capable of knocking you out. Veteran savvy experience that is able to carry him through 15 minutes. He ends up being a live dog in a lot of these spots because he can fight for 15 minutes. Even Sam Alvey, we talk about a run of bad luck. Like the Daong Jung fight should have been his. Furthermore, the Ryan Spann fight right before that, he's a plus 275 underdog. This close to knocking out Ryan Spann and winning that fight. Ends up having to lose a split decision. But Alvey's going to be there. He's going to be there for 15. He's going to fight for your dollar. It's going to be frustrating to watch in spots. It's like, Sam, do a little more. But in the end, I'm going to have faith that he is going to get it done. So this will be a dog play. And again, I agree with you in a lot of the points, and I will go with Smiling Sam Alvey.
All right, Dustin Jacoby takes on Darren Stewart, minus 170 Jacoby, plus 150 Stewart. Who you got here?
Again, you get an underdog case for this fight as well, just because it's fairly low level. Like Dustin Jacoby's coming in as a minus 175 favorite, but is it warranted? Like as far as his UFC run is concerned, you know, he beats Justin Ledet. I think that was more or less a foregone conclusion. But the Maxim Grishin fight, he looked awful. I mean, awful. Like very, very lucky to end up with a decision victory in that spot. His world-renowned kickboxing game, you know, he fought for glory. And as far as American kickboxing goes, he's legit. Factory X Muay Thai. Man, Grishin, a guy that looked awful himself in his own UFC prior to UFC fights, put a clinic on him, beat him up, battered him around the ring. And then the next fight with Ian Kudalaba, he got dominated in the wrestling, did an excellent job of surviving and fighting his way back into that fight. But I think it was on the basis of a 10-8, you know, he ends up having to settle for a draw in that spot. So he hasn't looked very good coming back to the UFC. And if to pinpoint what exactly does not look good about his game, his cardio seems massively off. Like he just needs to get tired of there, and then they just become these sluggish affairs. Again, if you're barely beating Maxim Grishin, that's cause for concern. Ian Kudalaba a little bit higher up on, but we know how Kudalaba fights. He's a banger bust kind of guy. And in this case, he tried to bang, right? Didn't work, ended up busting. Still got a draw out of it. When you look at Darren Stewart, again, he's not a 205er. This guy's a middleweight. But if to make an argument, it's that, well, at least Dustin Jacoby's a former middleweight himself. So they're both not particularly big. He hasn't looked all that good in his last run of fights, but his wrestling's probably a little bit better than Jacoby's. He fights decently enough in the clinch, and they both have bad cardio, but I might be willing to say slight lean for Darren Stewart. The first time he fought Eric Anders, he looked awful. The next one, he was like, I'd like to fight you at 205. Still looked awful, but looked way better. I think if he can continuously make some small improvements, fill out that frame at 205, and come back with a little bit better of some cardio and a better game plan, he could make it work against a guy like Dustin Jacoby. However, I'm making that point just to let you know we're not diving all the way on Jacoby. I think this is another one of these spots that I'd rather pass or, you know, end up with Dustin Jacoby on some later stuff. I'll recap it. I'll keep my eye open for weigh-ins. I'd really like to see how Darren Stewart comes in at his sophomore outing at 205. And I do think that grappling could make him live. But the fact that he's not a 205er, in my opinion, he is a natural middleweight. That wrestling shouldn't be as effective against Jacoby, the bigger man. And Jacoby's striking, you would think, would allow him to pull away later in the fight. I was largely disappointed in Stewart versus Eric Anders. But again, Eric Anders dominated him in the clinch. Jacoby probably won't do that. The smart move's probably a pass, but what we'll end up doing is probably end up taking Dustin Jacoby and keeping him on the later end of the parlays.
Yeah, I generally agree with pretty much everything you just said there. All right, moving on down the card, we got JJ Aldrich taking on Vanessa Demopoulos. Aldrich, your baby. It can be had for minus 380, Demopoulos plus 290. I can't imagine you're taking Demopoulos here.
No, you got to go with JJ Aldrich all day. She was supposed to take on Tracy Cortez, and that one's interesting because Tracy Cortez has got a pretty bona fide wrestling game behind her. So with JJ, the camp would have been almost exclusively sprawl and brawl, work the takedown defense, keep this thing standing, and use your superior striking acumen. I mean, JJ Aldrich at her best is a very smooth technical striker. She does rely primarily on the jab. I mean, it's not like they're power shots, but it's mostly just, picking your opponent apart. It's more of a point fight style, but I mean, she uses it extremely effectively. From childhood, she did traditional martial arts, and again, you see a lot of that in her, but she trains with Rose Namajunas. She's out of Colorado, trains at Denver, usually shows up in great shape. And she's only getting better. I mean, she's 28 years old. You are seeing some improvements from her game. Is she limited all around? Potentially, but, solid enough. A fight with Tracy Cortez would have been very telling for both fighters. Vanessa Demopoulos coming in a short notice. I mean, that almost plays perfectly into JJ Aldrich's game. Because in Vanessa, you got someone who's a mega babe, but doesn't have the wrestling, at all. No wrestling. Zero wrestling. As far as her striking goes, no striking, zero striking. Like runs head first into shots. Jiu-jitsu, legit, extremely flexible from her days as a stripper. But also, I believe she's currently a BJJ black belt, has won some world titles as far as gi jiu-jitsu goes. She's got a nasty inverted triangle, nasty triangle choke game in general, good with the armbar. You don't want to go to the ground with her. But if you're the type of fighter that can sprawl and brawl, which I know JJ Aldrich has been preparing for almost exclusively, you're going to use it to great effect. And I think that's what's going to happen here. Vanessa Demopoulos and all of her losses have been the exact same thing. The Corey McKenna fight, the Lupita Godinez fight, she runs face first at you, face first. She swings wild. She's got almost no reach on her. What's her official reach? She's 5'2" with a 62-inch reach, right? Yeah, so I mean that's been her problem, is that she's just not a striker. She doesn't have the frame for it. She needs to force these fights to the ground, and when she's unable to get these sorry, you know what? Tapology has her listed. I knew it was wrong. Tapology says she's 5'2" with a 62-inch reach, but UFC Stats, Fight Metric, which is supposed to be the official stat provider, has her at 5'2" with a 59-inch reach.
59?
59-inch reach, right? Which means JJ Aldrich is 67-inch reach, which represents an 8-inch reach advantage. JJ is just going to keep her on the end of the jab all day long. Vanessa will shoot from way too far out. She'll get desperate from way too far out, and JJ is going to rinse and repeat all night long. If the fight was to hit the ground, if Vanessa was to power through on something and get on top, we've got a problem on our hands. I just don't think that she's going to be able to do it consistently enough. And the fact that she's coming on a short notice really does make me feel a lot better about that assessment. So I got to go with JJ using the jab, using the kicks, using the range, staying to the outside, getting it job done. People might come back with, it's in the apex, man, shorter distance to close. Fair. I'm going to counter that point with, they're women 115 pounders. Like they don't take, it's not heavyweight, like they don't take a whole lot of room in the octagon to begin with. So like JJ should still be able to move laterally and get out of harm's way. For that reason, listen, 325 is a big price tag for women's MMA, especially when someone's a high-level grappler like Demopoulos, but they are right. It just went, yeah.
Yeah, that all kind of makes sense to me. I didn't actually know about this massive reach advantage. Like that, if you're not a great wrestler, you're giving up like 8 inches of reach, 59-inch 59-inch reach, like T-Rex arms. That's got to be the shortest reach in UFC history. We used to make fun of, who was it that we used to make fun of? Somebody had like a 60. Hannah Goldie's got a 61-inch reach. There's someone else that we used to make fun of. I think they had like a 60-inch reach. T-Rex arms.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
I think it was 62. 62 is what we'd always used to laugh about as like, holy crap, that's no reach, right? And yeah. In this case, it's a 59-inch reach. And again, go and tape study any fight from her, and it becomes very apparent that she's coming up short on almost all of her punches. But she's extremely willing. And her face will be busted up, and she'll have her mouth open, and she'll be, considered tired, and she's still coming right at you. In a 5-round fight. Again, so we mentioned the fact that she lost to Corey McKenna and Lupita Godinez the exact same way. Keep in mind, she fought Sam Hughes, and Sam Hughes does not look good in the UFC whatsoever. Sam Hughes wins the first 3 rounds and gets caught in an inverted triangle choke in the 4th. I remember watching that one. That should have been a loss as well. Yeah. All I'm gonna say is that, like, again, I think she's a very pretty girl. But the skill, she has to get this thing to the ground, and I haven't seen enough of that. So I got to go with JJ Aldrich to get the job done. Yeah,
I remember watching the Sam Hughes one when Sam Hughes was making her UFC debut. And yeah, Sam Hughes was dominating until the round 4 sub. All right, we got Jamal. Jamal Emmers taking on Pat Sabatini, minus 150 Emmers, plus 130 Sabatini. Who you got here?
You know what? I think I'm going to go with Pat Sabatini. And largely, you got really bad ring IQ, and there's a plus money tag on your opponent. It's worth a sniff at the very least. Jamal Emmers, it's scary to fade him in that. I think this guy is ultra talented. He's got a collegiate wrestling background. He's got very sharp grappling. He's got good striking. The problems is that he just allows himself to lose these close fights. He doesn't shoot the takedowns when he has the clear grappling advantage, or he'll shoot the takedowns too late in the round, or just won't shoot enough of them. The striking, good, crisp, a very athletic guy, moves well, can fight rangy, but there's not enough work out of him. He's not throwing enough continuously. Seeing him on the regional scene, I mean, he was a standout. The guy was extremely solid. However, his losses are to guys, to other fellow prospects. Thiago Moises knocked him out in the 5th round. Ray Trujillo was not a prospect, but he choked him out in the 2nd. And Julian Erosa on Contender Series knocked him out with a head kick in the 2nd. You could largely argue that he's a career underachiever. He fought for the RFA title. He lost in the 5th round. He fought in Contender Series. He got knocked out by Julian Erosa. He talked on a 17-14 journeyman in Ray Trujillo. He got choked out with a triangle in the 1st. So he does kind of come up short in a lot of these spots. Does a great job of reinventing himself and making it to the UFC. But in that Giga Chikadze fight, man, he just handed it over. You knew going in. Everybody knew going in. We have a Kyokushin karate black belt who fought for the Glory Kickboxing promotion, the world's premier kickboxing organization, taking on a guy that wrestled collegiately and has a much stronger grappling game. Why would you not take the fight to the ground? And the problem is that he scored 2 takedowns, but it was like he waited way too long. He stared at Giga way too long, and he allowed those rounds to be given to Giga. I personally did score the fight for Emmers. Unfortunately, only one judge agreed with that, and the other 2 went to Giga. And that was Emmers' fault. I didn't scream robbery. I didn't whine about it. Emmers gave that fight away. That's fair. He won the 3rd round. He looked better in the 3rd. He just waited way too long. The Vince Cachero fight, he looked better. But again, he went 15 minutes with Vince Cachero, who would be considered very low level. He got the victory. And then that's the only fight he's had in a year now. He's 32 years old. If there was a guy that I'd be willing to take an opportunity to fade, it could be him. With Pat Sabatini, meanwhile, this guy seems solid, man. He's 30 years old. He's the CFFC featherweight champion. But, I mean, he's got kind of good skill set all over. He's got I don't want to say grappling advantage over Emmers. Emmers is actually a pretty good grappler himself. But his grappling is pretty solid. He's got good striking. He's got solid cardio. He himself is a pretty durable guy. He comes out of Renzo Gracie, Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. So same camp as Sean Brady, who was supposed to be on the card, and same camp as Buddy from The Ultimate Fighter. Doesn't matter. It's solid enough camp out of Renzo Gracie, Philadelphia. I think that he's going to be a well-rounded guy. One thing I got to question is that you'll see him a lot of the time. He'll try to mix in his own offensive takedowns, right? With Jamal Emmers, you don't see Jamal Emmers have to counter wrestle a whole lot. We know that he's a good wrestler offensively, doesn't pull the trigger quite as much. But if for whatever reason he was to end up on his back with Pat Sabatini on top, that's going to be a problem. As far as stand-up goes, again, I would give the slight advantage to Emmers, but Sabatini might throw more volume and come forward and be the aggressor and make it work for himself. And we see underdogs hit every single event. This is another card. It looks like it's going to be mostly chalky. But for underdogs that I think have a shot, I might end up going with this Brady Hiestand kid. But Brady Hiestand as an underdog, Sam Alvey as an underdog, potentially a Darren Stewart underdog. But then more than I like that Darren Stewart one would be Pat Sabatini, right? Not the world's worst play. I do want to see the weigh-ins, but he's the younger, fresher guy coming out of a solid camp, and he's got a pretty well-rounded skill set. So I could see him pulling this one off, actually.
When Cody picks underdogs, I pay attention. Finally, we got Mana Martinez taking on Guido Canetti. Mana Martinez is a minus 265 favorite. Canetti can be had for plus 215. I mentioned earlier that I had a parlay. That was Ricky Turcios over 2.5 rounds with fight doesn't go to decision in this one. Mana Martinez goes out there and he tries to finish you quick. I think it's pretty clear from watching him versus Draco Rodriguez that his grappling is probably pretty questionable. And Canetti does, when Canetti wins, it's not usually by finish, he does go to decision. So there is a little bit of inherent risk in this. But I just think that it covers pretty much every angle that I want to be associated with on this fight. Just to use the doesn't go to decision as a parlay piece here. Maybe Canetti shows that he's got like a slight grappling advantage over Martinez in this spot. But what I really expect to see, Canetti's been knocked out a whole bunch of times now. He's like 36, 37 years old. He's getting
41.
long. He's only 31? 41. 41 years old. He's long in the tooth. They brought, he's here. Martinez was supposed to fight Trevin Jones, and then weirdly, he gets rebooked for this fight against Canetti, who's coming off of 2 losses, 3 of his last 4. The writing kind of seems on the wall. I'm expecting to see a Mana Martinez knockout, probably in round 1. What about you?
Yeah, you know what? I couldn't agree more. I think Manny Martinez is the clear and obvious choice here, right? He should go out there and he should be able to get the first round knockout. I'm super impressed with what I see out of him in terms of power in both hands. I mean, this kid lands on you and he can generate a whole lot of force. He does seem like one of these guys that prefers to get that early knockout. And again, his record is just it's almost all finishes outside of a split decision loss in his second pro fight. He goes out there, he knocks you out. But whereas a lot of these guys, we always make the same comparison, like while they're fighting cans, you want to see them fight later in rounds. Like he's fought in good guys. He knocked out Ricky Turcios in the first round. Ricky now in the finals of the Ultimate Fighter. He also has already fought Diego Rodriguez, who you see in the Ultimate Fighter, and then this Jose Johnson, who's on the Contender Series, is actually a sizable favorite on the Contender Series, well-experienced guy, and he goes out there and he knocks him out 32 seconds in. I think that he's aggressive. I think he's got good striking. I think he's got very solid wrestling as well. His takedown defense is solid. So even if Guido Canetti was to decide, you know what, I want to grapple this kid, I think he's going to have a hell of a hard time taking him down. And so for that reason, you got to think that Manny Martinez gets the job done. Manny, meanwhile, you pick up the phone. Who am I fighting? Jesse Strader. I'm in on that. Then the phone rings. Strader's out. You're fighting Trevin Jones. Well, that's a tough fight. Then Trevin Jones is not. You're not fighting Trevin Jones. You're fighting Guido Canetti. In on that. Like, talk about a great phone call to get. And Canetti's not coming in necessarily short notice because he was going to fight Mario Batista. But again, I think that was them trying to get Batista back in the win column after a tough loss to Trevin Jones. And Guido at one point sprung a huge upset. Hugo Vienna, he's a plus 450 underdog. Then he tested positive for steroids. Then he got a 3-year ban. He took off between 2015 and 2018 on a suspension. Came back in 2018, got subbed in the first round. And then you know what? They were going to Chile. And they had one guy on the roster from Chile. They signed just for the event, Diego Rivas, and they brought in Guido Canetti to be that opponent for the local Chilean guy. Well, he pulls off the victory in that fight, Paul. You know, even though he's a plus 150 underdog still. And then when you see him against other opposition, you know, Marlon Vera, we'll give him a total pass on that one. He actually looked somewhat competitive in the first round, as he somewhat, anyway, a lot of the time Guido is competitive in the first, and then he falls apart. But that last fight against Dana Batgarel, like a Mongolian wrestler who wasn't expected to get knocked out in the first round, he did look old in that fight. He looked like he was a shell of the guy he used to be. And then that's a year and a half ago. He's now coming in as a 41-year-old. We know that he's a banger standing, but he's not going to be able to bang with Martinez. So we're going to have to force him to the ground. And I think Manny Martinez's stout takedown defense will carry him over in that. Stuff the takedown, keep it standing, get the knockout. You know, you mentioned fight doesn't go the distance. Totally agree. Under 2.5, I agree. Under 1.5, very likely. And the Manny Martinez inside the distance by TKO, straight up. It all makes a lot of sense. So again, you can make a good argument for a lot of the underdogs on this card. This one, I don't necessarily agree with quite as much. And again, when you want to talk about pricings for the card in general, you've got a minus 525 price tag on Petroski. But it's like, shit, you know, he's got questionable cardio and, you know, I'll probably pay it, but I don't feel great about it. Muradov, 525 over Meerschaert. Feel better about that. But, you know, Meerschaert's one of these savvy junkyard dogs. A 380 price on JJ Aldrich. I actually feel better about that than the 2,525 price tags, to be completely honest with you. But, you know, geez, Vanessa's got a, you know, thick booty on her, and if she gets on top, she's got good jiu-jitsu. Guido Canetti, this is even better price tag, 265. And again, I feel better about this than I do about the 2,525 favorite. So I think there's a lot that you can do with Manny Martinez this week. I think there's a lot you can do with some of these, you know, various spots. And I'm hoping 3 or 4 underdogs come through and we're on the right side of those.
All right. Yeah, I'll just run through what I've got money on. I took Edson Barboza. I got him at minus 110. I've got the parlay with Turcios versus Hiestand over 2.5 rounds, parlayed with fight doesn't go to decision in Manny Martinez versus Canetti. I'm going to add Alvey inside the distance because I don't want to get screwed. There isn't much of a difference between by KO. That's how I think it's going to happen. But I don't want to get screwed if, you know, he snatches a neck like he did against. He snatched a neck against Eric Spicely way back when. Yeah. But like the difference between inside the distance and KO props isn't really paying all that much. I don't want to get scummed on anything like that. So I'm going to add that as soon as we get off the line here. I'm going to tail you on your boy, Pat Sabatini. I like Bryan Battle as a minus 160. I got to figure out what I'm going to parlay that with. I just typically don't bet 160 straight, but I could bet it straight. It's just, I guess, slightly less exciting. I don't know. For whatever reason, I'll find something else to parlay with Bryan Battle, but I think he's definitely my favorite side in any of those Ultimate Fighter finale fights. We're just about out of time here, Cody. But before we go, hit him with the PRP.
Hit them with the PRP, and I'll give you the method of victory. I've had a couple of requests. Shout out to 100Man. I know he hit me up as well, but you want method of victory with the pick, so I'll just run through it quick with how I think it's going to go down. So I'll go with Edson Barboza as well, feeling the decision. I would take the over 4.5 at plus 110. Bryan Battle minus 160. I think Battle knocks him out. I'm going to go with the dog play number 1 here, Brady Hiestand, and I think Brady's going to be done by decision. We're going to go with Kevin Lee by decision. Andre Petroski inside the distance, preferably knockout, but it could be a submission. So just take the ITD if you're going to go with any one of those. Makhmud Muradov, I would say inside the distance. Alessio Di Chirico. I'm going to say decision on that one. Alessio Di Chirico by decision. We're going to go Sam Alvey. Again, I'm thinking inside the distance like you are, Paul. And then Sam Alvey is going to be our dog number 2 officially. We're going to go with Dustin Jacoby by decision. I could be talked out of that one. Definitely wait for the weigh-ins. We're going to go with JJ Aldrich by decision specifically. Pat Sabatini by decision. That would be dog number 3. And then Mana Martinez by KO. So on a 12-fight card, we're hoping 3 underdogs come through. That sounds about fair. Hopefully we're on the right side of things. Hopefully, as far as the props goes, we can release some prop stuff later in the week, potentially, depending on it. All depends the weigh-ins for me. Weigh-ins is a huge thing. I get a lot of messages that are like, send your parlays earlier in the week and let us know early in the week so that we hit value and we hit pricing. And I agree with that, but I really like watching the weigh-ins and knowing it, because there's been times, long time in the past, you got money locked in a guy, you feel so good about it all week, and then later on in the week, it's like, oh, as a head coach is not able to fly in with him. It's like, oh, well, I wish I knew that, but whatever, it's all good. Then you see the guy in the scales and he looks like shit. And you just know, you're like, why did I lock in that bet 10 days ago? I don't like betting futures. So much can change in between here and there. So as of now, that's what we're going with. 9 favorites, 3 underdogs. But again, check out on Twitter. If you have any questions, any concerns, any comments, whatever, hit me up on Twitter at CJ Saftic. Or of course, we love comments on this video. Likes, subscribes, all that, just because it helps Pat, it helps the cog machine. It helps things move and advancing. So if you like the show, you like free content, that stuff always helps as well.
100%. Yeah, you're going to be dropping a PFL vid for the peoples, I imagine, on CJ MMA.
Yeah, 100%. The fights are on Friday, so my plan was to release it today, although I don't know if people will care because we're also releasing the UFC card. But again, PFL is one of those things you'd love to watch the weigh-ins, because you don't even know who's on the card until the weigh-ins. They'll tell you this guy and that guy. That's bullshit. You have to see them on the scale before you even know what the matchup is. And furthermore, again, I like to see the weigh-ins. But yeah, the PFL stuff, it's another interesting card. It's a couple good spots. So I know last week we kind of fucked up in that parlaying our Bellator guys and our PFL guys and our UFC guys together. You have one Taylor Johnson shits in the pie in a fight he very well could have won. And, Dennis Goldstaff did the exact same thing. It was a very winnable spot for him, but, they fight bad game plans. Ultimately, you can break down the fight, but if you run a simulated fight 100 times, Taylor Johnson probably does a little more. Probably not. He really shit the bed. That guy's dead to me. Goldstaff, I'll give him a pass, even though he fought the worst game plan known to man. I will give him a pass. Croatian power got the better of him. But Taylor Johnson, dead to me. I'm not threatening him, by the way.
Getting cut from the Bellator prelims? Where's he going? Where's he going from there?
Taylor Johnson?
Yeah.
They'll bring him back. And if they match him up against some putts, then sure. I mean, let's be real here.
If they like him, they'll match him up with some putts. That's the Bellator way. Minus 1,000 favorites across the board. It isn't an easy way to make money parlaying all of those pieces together. That wraps it up for us this week. Want to thank Cody Saftic, obviously, for being in line. Want to thank producer Pat and producer Matt behind the scenes for doing all the sweet cuts. For Pat, Matt, and Cody, I'm Paul, saying goodbye and good luck.
Oh!